What's up, guys? Part-time Gamer Dad here. It is June 2nd, and there is always a plan B. That's right, it is the 10-year anniversary of Seth Rollins turning on the Shield, joining Triple H, joining what would become known as The Authority, and setting off three separate careers that have really defined this era of wrestling for the last decade. Now, even though they're not all in WWE, they're all shaping and molding the way that professional wrestling is viewed worldwide, with Jon Moxley, formerly known as Dean Ambrose, showing off his wrestling chops and his hardcore, more blood-filled version of wrestling in companies such as, of course, All Elite Wrestling, AEW, but also New Japan as their current World Heavyweight Champion. Then, of course, the two pillars of WWE currently not named Cody Rhodes are Seth freaking Rollins, who just had the longest World Heavyweight Championship reign in history, but also Roman Reigns, the guy that just had the longest title reign since Hulk Hogan in the 80s. Now, sure, I know there are people who think that they're overrated or maybe overhyped, but these are three guys that really stand as the pillars of professional wrestling, have over the last decade, have come into their own, that are better now than they were a decade ago, and they have really molded what wrestling is today in this current landscape. Without these three, I don't know if we have such a footing and a vice grip of pop culture and really wrestling being seen as an art form in the media and being so big as it is right now, which is arguably the biggest it's been since the Attitude Era with Stone Cold Steve Austin. And of course, somebody else who's contributed to some of the success lately, The Rock. So with that being said, I'm going to rank them. I'm going to rank the members of the Shield, and I'm going to give you the reasons why. We're going to look at some of the key metrics being World Championships won, the length of the reign, the impact they've had within the businesses or organizations or companies that they have been involved in. And we might even have a fun one in there as a member of the Shield. But this has to be members of the Shield that have appeared on TV. So Triple H, you don't get to be part of this list. Sorry. Coming in at number 4, of course, it's got to be Kurt Angle. He replaced Roman Reigns to team up with Seth Rollins and Dean Ambrose to take on The Miz, Sheamus and Cesaro, The Bar, Braun Strowman and Kane. And this was a 5-on-3 handicap match at TLC 2017. You know, I love Kurt. He's actually in my top 5 wrestlers of all time and probably always will be. He is such a wrestling genius. And he took to pro wrestling better than probably anybody ever, as quickly as he did. I would say, though, if you look at what he's done as a member of the Shield, I mean, the dude was part of it for one day, right? So it's not like he's really a valued member of the Shield. But I think it's kind of fun that for one night he got to kind of cosplay as a member of the Shield and pick up the win against that monstrous team of baddies at TLC 2017. Obviously, this was more ranking on the career, the full career of like who Kurt was before the Shield and so on. That'd be one thing. However, we're looking at like Shield members and like what they accomplished since they've been part of the Shield. And obviously, Kurt, he retired about a year and a half after he was part of the Shield. So while I love the man, and I could maybe do a career retrospective on him at some point or kind of talk about him in the rankings of some other metrics or some other topics or groups. For this one, Kurt, unfortunately, I love you, man, but you got to go at the bottom. Kicking off this list properly, at number 3, and some of you are going to be very upset about this, is Jon Moxley, a.k.a. in the WWE known as Dean Ambrose. And look, I'm not putting Dean or John in third place because he's in AEW. Quite the opposite. I think that a lot of the best work that he's done has been in AEW, but we got to be honest with ourselves that Jon Moxley, Dean Ambrose, is not as dynamic in terms of his character nuance and the shifts that he's made throughout his career and the way that he's kind of like pivoted as time has gone on as, say, Seth Rollins or Roman Reigns. And also as a result of that, the impact that he's had on the world of professional wrestling, while notable, is not at the same level as those other two guys. And I say this as somebody who was a big fan of Dean Ambrose. He was actually my favorite wrestler in the WWE post breaking up with the Shield. Actually, even like while he was part of the Shield towards the end, I loved that guy. And even when he went to AEW, I loved Mox, and he was one of the first ever like AEW merch I had was his shirt that said Mox across the middle. And so when I think about Jon Moxley, this isn't a knock on him, but he has more world championship reigns than anybody else on the Shield. And how many of them were truly notable outside of that singular one that ended with Kenny Omega beating him at Winter is Coming in 2020? Now, look, I also understand that we don't want to knock a guy because he doesn't change much and he's not somebody who flips his characters around, because it's admirable that he is somebody who doesn't flip around. But also with Moxley, there's definitely an element of he doesn't seem to be as invested in the business as somebody like a Rollins or a Reigns. And that's not to say he doesn't love pro wrestling. I believe he loves pro wrestling. I believe he loves his version of pro wrestling versus like what pro wrestling is holistically. So he really likes the hardcore matches, and I praise him for that. It's just not my thing, and I think that for me, watching him in those matches, it's a little too much of just blood and guts and a little too much just over the top for the sake of being over the top and bleeding for the sake of bleeding versus like telling a story through that. Now, there have been some cases where he has told a story through that, and those have been great matches, but I look at his whole body of work, and while really solid and better than a great number of wrestlers, when comparing it against Seth Rollins and Roman Reigns, I'm just going to lean towards those other two guys in terms of what I think they bring to the table and their careers and how it's been molding the world of professional wrestling around them since the breakup of the Shield. If this was just about the last year and a half, Seth Rollins would be number one. Seth Rollins has done the career work of his life in the last 18 months, from really having that great feud with Cody and then kind of transitioning that into being the first ever World Heavyweight Champion, and then putting on just constant classics all throughout this nearly year run, and being the workhorse of WWE, putting his body through hell, and then being the true MVP of WrestleMania 40 by being in that night one main event, that dream matchup, if you will, teaming with Cody Rhodes to wrestle The Rock and Roman Reigns, and then opening night two to defend unsuccessfully, I might add, the World Heavyweight Championship against Drew McIntyre, and then obviously being involved in the main event where Roman Reigns actually got his revenge from the breakup of the Shield by hitting Seth Rollins with the chair instead of going after Cody so that he could secure himself the victory. And that was just such poetic, beautiful storytelling, and something that we're still like seeing the right way to tell the story all of these years later, because Triple H knows about nuance. And that's really what I think Seth brings to the world of professional wrestling. It's the nuance, it's the flashiness, it's the constant work rate. If we're talking about work rate of the three, he is the best. There's no doubt, I think, in anybody's mind that Seth is maybe the best like all-around wrestler in the history of at least the last 10, 15 years. But dude, he's up there for best of all time. I don't think I've ever seen him have a bad match. And that's just a testament to that guy. At the same time, we're not just looking at the last 18 months. We're looking at the last 10 years. And so there's been a lot of instances where Seth has grown really stale, that he's just been kind of lost in limbo. He has made a lot of pivots and transitions. And at the same time, there's been periods where it didn't really click with the crowd. It didn't click with the fan base. Definitely didn't click with me. And I think that Seth is now in a place where we're really seeing what he can do and operate at the top of his ability. I'm really excited for him to come back. If he does decide to come back, like, look, he could retire now and he would have a Hall of Fame career. But I would love to see him come back and wrestle CM Punk at WrestleMania, especially if it was in the main event of like night one. It doesn't have to be for a title. I think this is a generational matchup. It's a dream match. It's worthy of a WrestleMania main event. But if it was for the world title somehow, that would be great too. I think that Seth just has so much to offer. But when you look at the scope of what's happened beyond the last 18 months, it's just not quite the same as my number one guy. And before you all come at me, because you could say, well, what about the big dog stuff? Yeah, no. That was trash. And there was a lot of them trying to force feed Roman down our throats. But at the same time, Roman was kind of pivoting a little bit here, a little bit there. And the last half decade, guys, it's been the Roman show. And rightfully so. The Tribal Chief character change was the most beneficial character change in the history of professional wrestling. Not even like Rocky Maivia to The Rock, Ringmaster to Stone Cold, Hunter Hearst Helmsley to The Game. Those are really significant, important character changes, but the Tribal Chief is the most important in the history of the business. Also, that really loud wind was the AC because it'd be hot in the summertime. Roman Reigns is number one for the very simple fact that over the last 4 years, Roman Reigns has made wrestling cool again. He's brought it into the mainstream in a way that nobody else has done in a long time. And also, he has had one hell of a resume of matches that have just been bangers over the last 4 years. Guys, when he was wrestling Jay at the beginning of his reign, that was quality, like top tier, 5-star affairs, and he's just gotten better since then. Now, yes, did he cut back on his time in the ring and his schedule? Yeah, absolutely. But that doesn't matter because the world of the WWE, the major storylines have revolved around Roman, and the number of people that have been elevated by being in his orbit over the last 4 years is exponential. Look at the fact that Jey Uso is now one of the main event players, not just on Monday Night Raw, but across all of WWE, one of the biggest baby faces in the whole company. And you cannot deny that what Roman touches turns to gold. And then on top of all that, even with The Rock coming back and kind of inserting himself to be the main character of WrestleMania 40 alongside Cody, Roman still was the man who put Cody over, and Cody became a made man because of Roman. So there's a lot to say that the impact of what he's been able to do for the wrestling world and those around him, Roman should get number one based on just that, but then also a nearly 4-year reign, guys. It will never be seen again. I really believe it. That was the longest reign that we will probably ever see again for WWE World Champions. And I cannot speak highly enough that Roman in the last 4 years, for all the bad that happened between 2014 and 2020, he has more than doubled the positives to outweigh that negative in what he's accomplished since returning as a Tribal Chief. So I acknowledge him. I acknowledge him as number one on my list. And I'm kind of sad that we aren't going to have a reign like this, no pun intended, again, probably ever in the future of WWE. But for all the things that he contributed and for all the people he put over and for the impact he's had on the business to make it this cool again, Roman, we thank you. All right, guys, thanks for watching. Make sure you let me know down in the comments below where I was wrong, how you would rank the members of the Shield, including Kurt Angle. Shoot, throw Triple H in there if you want. Also, make sure you like this video. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed. We've got a lot of videos coming out. I'm going to be taking a week off of work here pretty soon, so we'll be releasing a lot of content shortly after that. Appreciate the support, and I will see you guys very soon.